Hello there, I'm Jimmy Shuker alongside Albert Chalmers, and this is Radiant Light, a spiritual discussion podcast, episode 10, Zen Diaries 2. Welcome to what is quickly becoming one of our favourite types of episodes. On today's show, Albert and I will once again be pulling the curtain back and updating you guys on what's been going on behind the scenes here on the Radiant Light podcast. We've got some more Matrixy type stories to tell you about, as well as more examples of how the Zen Buddhism applies to our daily lives. And with that being said, let's get started. So Albert, the first thing that I feel we should discuss is how immediately following Zen Diaries 1, we made a conscious effort to kind of level up. We made 2 episodes in a row where we invited guests, Sean and Daniel, and both of these episodes had videos as well.
Right.
What was your feelings going into all this? Like feelings, expectations?
Well, I really got into the idea of doing it as a YouTube channel and just focusing not just on the audio. So I wanted to test out the video side of things because I felt like we neglected it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, pardon the pun, we were making a podcast. It was only natural to focus on audio.
Yeah,
alone.
exactly. But since it was on YouTube, I just felt like, what could we do to explore that avenue as well, just to see where it could go?
Yeah, it was like, why would we not kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then what we quickly found is that we was opening a whole bag of yin-yang.
Yeah.
So the benefits were obvious. You know, we now had videos. It's easier on the eye. You know, it's
you can
just
see our faces.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a little bit more of a personal interaction with our audience. But then, like I said, there's a yin-yang. There's good and there's bad. We suddenly ran into a whole load of technical problems that we wasn't really expecting and having to navigate our way through. So, for example, it was such a shame, but the interview with Sean was probably the worst audio that we had on any of our episodes.
Yeah, not the quality of the audio, but the fact that it cut out so frequently.
Yeah.
You're like, it's better to have bad audio where you can hear what's being said than have good audio where you can't hear chunks of audio at all, right? So
yeah, exactly. And I mean, upon my shoulders be it, I said right at the beginning when we started the Radiant Light podcast, I said, look, finished is better than perfect. You know, it's
you did say that.
Yeah, exactly. that was the karma coming round and forcing me to eat my words. So then we had Daniel on as our in-studio guest, first ever episode actually inside the Radiant Light studios. And we had a bit of a Matrixy experience, didn't we?
I'd say we had a few.
Yeah, definitely.
As we would expect, you know.
Yeah, as the universe has taught us. So the thing that comes to my mind firstly is, you know, we got settled in, we're feeling zen, we're in the moment, we're talking about Daniel's backgrounds of how he came into Christianity. And then almost exactly on the point where I said, I have a story about a sign from God. No sooner did the words leave my mouth of a sign from God, we had a little bit of divine intervention ourselves, and the camera just cut out.
Yeah.
Just as I said it, and we had no footage of me actually speaking the story. We only had the audio.
Right.
So it was kind of like we were doing our thing and talking about God and talking about religion, and then, you know, the Lord again came in and intervened with what was going on.
I mean, I know you're going to interpret it in a personal way, right? But from my perspective, it's just one of those things that I've learned throughout the day. There's going to be these matrixy things that happen. And that's just one of those things where it led us in a direction that I'm actually kind of grateful for that it happened that way. In the moment, I freaked out because I thought Jimmy's going to be upset, and because he told this nice story, and now we don't have the video of him telling the story. But then, should I explain it or?
Yeah.
Yeah, the way it went down is I walked into the kitchen and our friend Krille had just shown up out of the blue, quote unquote.
Hold that thought. We'll come back on a little bit more to do with Krille in a second.
But anyway, I said, shit, man, don't say anything. But the video cut out halfway through that first part. And then he's like, oh, it's cool. You can just put in some videos of something else in there. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then I realized if we're going to take advantage of the story, we should have... I mean, I didn't realize it all in the exact moment, but it started that seed of...
Yeah, Krille planted the seed when he said that you've still got the audio, but you've not got the video. So you can play some images or some videos or whatever over the top as Jimmy's talking.
Exactly.
So you was able to deliver the news to me in a way that was, going to be a bit less crushing to my ego. Oh, Jimmy, we've not got the video of you talking, but Krille's had this idea. What do you think?
It's not even your ego. It's more just the product, right? Thinking about the product and...
Yeah, exactly.
Having just blank screen during the part where we're supposed to be following you in this story kind of disappoints in a way.
Yeah, but the irony of the moment is that it happened right as I was talking about my story. So it was almost like a little test from the universe.
100%.
Is he going to react well to this? In former years, I might have hit the roof over something like that, as silly as it sounds now.
Well, it could have ruined the whole mood for the whole rest of the episode too, right?
Exactly, yeah. So Krille helped us there. And I thought it was quite... this was a great example of the Taoism, though. When, as we've said previously, when something quote unquote bad happens, well, maybe it's bad and maybe it's not. That bit of divine intervention that we had, camera cuts out, audio keeps going, that led us on a whole new path that we never even planned for.
Exactly.
Fast forward, what was it, middle of the week after, I'm meeting up with you on a random Wednesday morning, and we're out filming a video of me dressed up as an estate agent to play over the top of the Sign from God story.
Which turned out better in the end.
Well, yeah, we added a whole new dimension to our product.
It's like a mini documentary or something.
Exactly, yeah, that we could have never have accounted for. And I don't know if this is getting a bit wooey as well, but I kind of felt it was a bit like the law of attraction. You heard like The Secret and the law of attraction, where, for the benefit of our listeners that don't know The Secret and the law of attraction, it's kind of like you get more of what you focus on. Your thoughts become things, and you're manifesting. And I'm sure on one of these documentaries that I've watched or listened to, somebody made the point of saying, you don't know how you're going to get there. All you need to know is you are going to get there. We're aiming to make this product, to manifest the Radiant Light podcast and videos and whatnot. But at some point, the moose will come into play, and something externally will be attracted to us that we don't know about yet. Right. We could never anticipate that. So I guess that's kind of like the first small example of that happening.
I think we have to take a microscope to it and see it as a small problem in a bigger context. And in the moment, it can feel like a big problem in the grand scheme of things when it really isn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's how you react to those curveballs as you go.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because that thought's crossed my mind as well. If you kind of take a step out and look at things from a more lateral perspective, it's kind of like, oh yeah, at one point we're going to have 20 episodes produced, and it's like, oh yeah, that little one there, that was the one where the camera cut out, ha 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 ha. But yeah, in the moment, if you're not zen, it might seem like a bigger deal than it actually is.
Well, each episode is the the biggest, best, and newest, right? So
Yeah.
you have to treat it that way in the moment, but in retrospect, everything will seem like a joke, right? So it's more fun in the moment if you can laugh at life when it comes at you than if you get tense and let it ruin your mood all the time, and you're just going to constantly be stepping on your own toes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all about living in the moment here in the Radiant
Yeah.
Light podcast. Going back to Kriller, he showed up out of the blue literally seconds before we was about to record this
Divine
Christianity
intervention.
episode. Yeah, divine intervention, matrixy experience from the universe. Yeah, call it what you will, but like literally we're seconds away from hitting shoot, and there he is. And it was a little bit awkward. We said, oh, can you wait in the other room? We're recording this episode. And he goes on to kind of save the day with that idea about...
Saved the vibe, definitely.
Yeah, he definitely saved the vibe in the moment by suggesting about having a couple of videos and pictures over the top of it. But what I wanted to say was, there's been times where I've been a little bit too frustrated, and I probably have let my ego get in the way a little bit too much. But then after a while, and I really feel this is thanks to Taoism and just learning to be a bit more flexible in my thinking, I came to think to myself, well, actually, Kriller being around, he's a nice guy, he doesn't mean any harm, and that's just the natural Tao of the way things are. So rather than let my ego get in the way of it and getting all bent out of shape about it, why not just embrace and think a little bit differently? And that's where we come up with... I mean, he could have at least been the cameraman that night.
Yeah, even I noticed after when you said that, I was like, I probably didn't adapt as quickly in the moment as I could have. So it was a learning experience, definitely.
Yeah, it could be perceived as a little bit rude that we kind of just left him in the other room while us lot went off and did our podcast.
Yeah, it's not really inclusive in the way we kind of promote ourselves. So
yeah,
we have to own up to that, I guess, for sure.
So as time went by during these last few episodes, our roles kind of changed a little bit, and as time went on, we kind of labelled ourselves as director and producer, with me being the director of the show and you obviously producing everything. Yeah. How did you feel that kind of panned out?
I guess just having gone to film school and being a little bit aware of that world, I kind of noticed certain tendencies that you were more having a clear vision of the episode itself, and I was more making the things happen, getting the guests on, getting the time right, and making the, it's ironic because you're the Confucianist, but I was making this happen, but you had a clear vision that allowed it to actually manifest.
Yeah, I was putting things into place in terms of like the order of the episodes, and then you was bringing it to life basically. Yeah. I mean, I'm not exactly the world's greatest with technology.
Yeah, and a director never has to be good with technology. The best directors are more dealing with actors, or I guess you could say in this context, being an interviewer,
Yeah,
as opposed to, I know every piece of technology. And so those things are not supposed to be the director's concern. It's supposed to just happen around him like magic. That's the movie that's what they say, movie magic. It's like the director has a vision and everyone else makes it happen without him noticing the problems behind the scenes and all that stuff.
Right, yeah, gotcha. And
he's in a fairy tale and we're all joining him for the ride kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was kind of like that as well, because like you said, our relationship kind of changed a bit. So when we was right in the thick of it, having two videos kind of one after the other, and we're experiencing all these new problems that we hadn't accounted for. You know, the camera cutting out, some audio differences. Like, we started getting differences of opinions on stuff as well. So I think, for example, there was one day I'm working at the factory, and in the moment I felt kind of blindsided by it, where you just kind of called me up and said, okay, well, I've finished producing this now. The audio version is going to be on the usual podcast platforms, but the YouTube version will just take out the Sign from God stuff. And I mean, like, I was practically having a heart attack at that point.
At least I called you.
Yeah.
Before I broke your heart.
Oh, could you imagine?
I had the courtesy to call you.
Yeah, and then I kind of realised in that moment, you said to me, well, I haven't really got any pictures that I can put onto this, you know, and I'm kind of like, you know, well, we'll use your imagination. And it's like, I suddenly realised...
You're a typical director.
Yeah, it literally is like the relationship a director and a producer has, you know, and you've kind of awoken me to this. And then I kind of started taking my role a little bit more seriously. I thought to myself, oh yeah, like, if I really want that video and pictures to come to life, I do actually have a responsibility to give Albert the material he needs to put it all together. I've just kind of said, yeah, whack a few things together, and it's got to be done by Tuesday as well. You know, it's like I've given him no material and a deadline, and I've put all this pressure on him, and then I'm expecting to just pull it out of his backside, you know. So yeah, I think that was a moment where we kind of needed to kind of catch ourselves. And I think at one point we actually said that right in the thick of that, we kind of lost the initial spirit of what the podcast was all about. I mean, it is a Zen, a Zen product where, you know, we're supposedly in the now and enjoying what we're doing, and walking that middle path and appreciating what we have in life. And here we are, like, stressing out down the phone at each other over a video, you know. So
I don't know how stressed we really were. It's just more...
Well, we'd lost that charm, hadn't we? You know, that whole thing, all chips and dip, get in the mood, do the middle way on a Friday or Saturday night or whatever. We'd kind of lost that very quickly. So that was, I believe, the point where we realised, okay, our video episodes are more of a special occasion. You know, we at this early stage in the Radiant Light podcast, we can't produce a video as much as we love to, and we want to do more of that kind of thing. You know, we can't do it on a consistent basis.
Yeah, it has to be sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when we kind of, you know, by the time we got on to episodes 8, 9 and now 10, you know, with the Mount Rushmore and the Alan Watts, we returned to the original Zen spirit of the podcast, you know, where we hang out, we get that charm back, we get on a level.
Kind of the format makes the difference, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. You know, our mixture of Confucianism and Taoism, you know, you kind of doing your thing here in the moment, me preparing my bullet points and script, you know, it kind of got
flows
back
more
to
naturally.
Yeah. And if I remember right, before we recorded the Mount Rushmore episode 8, we actually made I think it might have been me that said, look, I really feel we need to just sit down together and reflect on the whole thing and get on the same page, right? You remember that day?
I think you might have misunderstood the whole me removing the story, because you thought I was seeing it as disposable, but I wanted to save it for something else with visuals to go along with it, and that's how we came up with the idea of filming it like a documentary in the first place. But getting there was a little uncomfortable, because I had to hold your hand through the process of the big bad film industry mindset.
The thing that disturbed me wasn't what the disagreements were about themselves. It was more about that I just didn't see them coming. Like, I felt so blindsided. Like, I thought we'd just agreed on stuff. Like, that video is one example. But then we went off in our different directions, and like something else happened. So okay, I guess another example, I got to mention this, was the the intros to the video versions. So for the benefits of our listeners at home, that little thing that I do at the start of the show where I say, oh, hello there, and if you've watched any of the YouTube versions, I kind of sit in there reading my Zen book, and then I let the music play and casually look up at the audience and say, oh, well, hello there. It's something I used to film myself doing as a kid, like all the time. It was like a little catchphrase on family videos, home movies and stuff that, we did on summer holidays and whatever. And it kind of has a bit of a sentimental meaning to me. So when I saw that we'd produced them, they were kind of like a little bit on fast forward, and I wasn't expecting that every time. Like, I'd said to Albert, I sort of come in and said, okay, well, I'm going to be counting to 26 in my head, because I know that's how long the Radiant Light entrance music takes at the start, and then I'm going to look up the camera and say, oh, hello there. And I thought Albert just knew that. And then when I saw the Christianity version and it had already gone live on YouTube, I'm kind of like on fast forward, and that the 26 seconds are just not there and the music doesn't play. So, the inner child in me really came out here, and I was really disappointed. But it wasn't the disagreement itself. It was kind of like, how does he not know this? I said 26 seconds. And so when we sat down in between episodes just to talk about that, and I wanted to pour my heart out about this, something Albert said to me that just really dawned on me. It was like, look, Jimmy, with the greatest will in the world is not going to sit there and tune into YouTube and say, hey, let's wait 26 seconds for Jimmy to do that thing he did when he was a little kid. And it was just like, oh my God, yeah, I need to just move my ego out the way. Of course, like, it's not catchy for an audience, right?
Well, you got it when you heard it, your face changed and you smiled, and I was like, oh, he gets it. But it wasn't like, I wanted to be kind to the inner child and kind of pat him on the back and be like, I get it, but there's people out there who don't know you.
Yeah.
It's just a reality check moment.
I'm so glad that we did that in a face-to-face way, though, because that's something, if it was discussed over text message, it could have got really, like, read out of context, and, maybe a bit of a misunderstanding or whatever. So I'm grateful that we did that and sat down, because when you put it to me in those terms, it was like, oh yeah, of course. Nobody's going to watch. People are going to tune out in droves if it's just 20 plus seconds of a guy reading a Bible,
Exactly, that's what it was. But until I saw it with the objective kind of clear mind, not thinking, oh, that's my friend and we're doing this thing and it is a funny thing between us.
Yeah.
But there's the rest of the world out there, right? So it's
you got to look at it from
it's
another perspective. Yeah, of course. And these kind of things, they came up in numerous ways. Like, for example, when you said, I was at work and we're talking about the Sign from God video thing again, and you'd said to me, instead of just putting pictures, like, I couldn't find the pictures, old pictures of me in a Christian background and then going down a different path. You said, well, we could just film a couple of bits and pieces of you praying beside the bed and stuff. And I think, my ego was getting in the way again, and I was like, oh wow, that'll never work. And you was like, look, I'll send you a video so you can see the one of Daniel and you'll see how it looks. And then I look at this video and I don't even get to the end of it. I'm like, wow, it looks brilliant. Of course we've got to film that. And, straight away I cut the video, ringing him back. Yep, let's do it. It's like things can be communicated from person to person in a different way.
Well, that was one of those times where I felt like I was kind of having to force things, and like, with my Taoism, I don't believe in forcing things, but that was one of the times where I believed in it strongly enough, where I thought it is kind of, the juice is worth the squeeze, as long as I can push Daniel and Jimmy in a gentle kind of way towards this final product.
Because Daniel had some resistance to filming that as well, didn't he?
It's just normal. Certain people don't get what I'm trying to do with my videos, and it's hard to show you a video that we haven't filmed yet, and once you see it, you'll know why I wanted it. It's just like this kind of, it is a dynamic, and I've had this dynamic so long because I've been making videos my whole life, and so have you, right? So you can kind of relate in a sense. When there's two directors, it's going to be hell. And that's what I realized. I'm like, if Jimmy's trying to be the director and I'm trying to be the director, we're going to butt heads. It's going to be yin and yin, or yang and yang. It's not going to work. We have to stay with this whole yin-yang balance.
But I do still feel you were quite Taoist in that moment. You say that you felt you were forcing it on me, but you didn't force it that much. You kind of like sent me the video and then you backed off. You're like, he'll just get it in his own time.
Well, that's me now, right? I mean, I've learned the hard way through the years. So I am more of a Taoist now than I were in film school, to be honest. Like, there was a time when I was the director, and that was that was it. I had the final say, and I mean, I'd like to think I've always kind of taken things on board. But if I think that my way is the right way, I'm just going to make it happen. And that can rub people the wrong way, and then it loses the morale, the fun of it. Once that's gone, you can't get that back. We can't do that, because then the whole thing will just die. So exactly.
That led me on to a point I remember at the time saying, this whole thing that we're doing, it's got to be fun, it's got to be enjoyable. It's not as if we're sitting here making and breaking £1 million on this Radiant Light podcast. It's something that we do for fun,
It's for fun, and it's got to be zen, and it's got to be, good vibes.
It's great vibes.
Yeah, but when you had those in the moment conversations, you could feel the vibe of the person, so the misunderstandings don't happen. But like you said, if we had just wrote each other on text, the vibe's not there in the same way, so you can misunderstand the words themselves, because the words are often misleading.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, when you sit down with a person in day-to-day life, you can often just feel their aura. You kind of, like you say, sense the vibe when you're in that moment and you're having these in-person experiences, and you can't get that through text messages, or you can totally misread it in text messages, that's for sure. So it was good that we did just sit down and clear everything up that day. I felt like it really kind of put us on the right path for what came next with Mount Rushmore. It's like
getting back on the right frequency,
Yeah, exactly.
Get on the same page. And
I came out of that conversation really vibrating on a much higher level, just so looking forward to doing the Mount Rushmore and the Alan Watts one, and also future video episodes as well, that of course are still going to happen, but now at least we're just a little bit more pre-prepared for the yin and the yang that comes with them. Albert, I just want to give you an inside view of how much of an inner child I was behaving like that day with the intro thing. Just imagine this from an inner child perspective. So I texted you the night before saying, is everything good to go with the big release date for the Christianity episode? And you replied back to me, yeah, it's all set up to go. It's going to go automatically on YouTube tonight. So I went to bed, sleep. Oh yeah, like kid on Christmas Eve kind of thing. It's going to be there. And I wake up in the next morning, and it's 4 a.m. I got a little bit of time. I think, I'm going to watch a little bit before I go to work. And again, I only mean this to say, just look at my inner child here. I put on the video and I watched that intro,
Oh man.
and I was so upset that my "oh hello there" thing wasn't the way I wanted it to be that I just turned it off and thought, oh, I'll watch some of this later.
Oh
And then
man.
I just like went to work, like, you know, a little bit grumpy or whatever, but just, yeah, watched it like a couple of hours later once I'd got over it.
I guess you didn't enjoy it as much because your expectations were not met in that same way.
Yeah, of course I enjoyed it. I mean, once I'd got over the little thing about
You know
the
what it's
intro,
kind of like, right? You know what
Go
I'm
on.
going to say, right? It's like telling a kid Santa Claus isn't real or something. You know, it's that you lost a little bit of innocence.
a little bit,
Yeah.
But
Sorry, man.
but the thing is, it was so true, though. You know,
Yeah.
like if you look at it from a professional point of view, that intro thing did need to get sped up a little bit, really.
It's kind of a faster paced world that we live in, and even just accepting that kind of sucks, but you have to adapt. It's like sink or swim, survival of the fittest. Not to say that we should only do things with the audience in mind, but you know, if there is even a small audience, you want to get them involved or invested in what you're doing, right? And you have to do that quite quickly. Unfortunately, it's not a
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of look on it on a broader scale, it's kind of like a fine line that we walk, because it's a Zen podcast and we're talking about Eastern philosophy and being less capitalistic and enjoying the moment. But then again, we are also producing a product as well, so we do have to think of the audience in mind. So you just don't want to turn out like a hypocrite, really.
well. I think we're not really involved in Zen in a larger sense. We're just two guys trying to do it on our own for what it's worth. But there's some of the other Zen channels that are more. It seems like they're targeted for people with a really long attention span, if I can say that in a nice way. It's a little bit
Yeah.
slow and boring. It's stale and kind of just doesn't get to the point as quickly as you'd like it to. And I think it's an unnecessary.
I think a way I'd like to put it is, we've said before that we want to, in a way, continue the Alan Watts legacy and bring Eastern philosophy and Zen wisdom into the Western world. But the way we want to communicate this message is a little bit cool, a little bit more hipster. I don't know. I'm so not sounding hipster by saying it like that, but do you know what I mean? Just in a way that's a bit more relatable, shall we say? You know, like the average guy on the street might say, "Oh yeah, okay, then I'll listen to a bit of Zen." Then, like, how does this work? You know, rather than plainly preaching the gospel.
Yeah,
Shall
you
we
don't want to
say?
come at it like. Because then it's almost the same thing as the Bible thumper. It's almost like I'm too Zen to care about anything, and I'm too enlightened to understand human emotion. And I'm like, I just don't want to be like that. I mean, like, you know, the old Star Wars movies were fun and cool, and there was a bit of sexiness to them and a little bit of childness to them, and everyone could enjoy it, you know?
Yeah.
And then it just became kind of weird where the Jedi became like celibate, weird, creepy dudes that you wouldn't want to hang out with. Like, I don't want us to be Jedis that are like creeping people out. I want to be like a real dude. You're like a lad, you know? You're just a guy from the streets of London. I'm a guy from the streets of Toronto. I'm a little bit hip hop. I used to skateboard. I've done some things, you know. We're like real people. I don't want to lose that quality of who we
Well,
are.
the word I keep coming back to here is relatable.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Eastern philosophy, yeah, we're talking about, in a lot of instances, we're talking about stuff that happened centuries ago, and, or more than centuries ago, and we want to just get it across in a more cooler, more understandable way that,
Modern.
yeah, that people can consume and that will actually be fun to consume.
Right.
Hence the Zen Diaries theme, really, isn't it? You know, it's literally relating this wisdom to day-to-day life.
True.
Albert, if I was to rewind all the way back to the very beginning of the Radiant Light podcast, like when we initially had the idea to make our own podcast, you said that this whole thing that we're doing would naturally be whatever it's going to be, and we can't really foresee that yet or how we were going to get there. And I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on that for a second, because I'll tell you, in that moment, I didn't have a clue what you were talking about. Like it really didn't resonate with me. I was kind of like thinking to myself, what is he talking about? If we're going to make a podcast, we're going to meet on the Saturday night to record it, and then we're going to edit it on the Tuesday. And, you know, as long as we keep doing that in a consistent basis over 2 weeks, it will happen. It's like strange to think that that whole Taoism and Confucian thing was so apparent, even in that really early stage.
Right. You kind of saw it as a controlled experiment. And
Well,
I
yeah,
saw it as like a hydrogen bomb.
yeah, totally. Yeah, like I kind of saw like a factory conveyor belt type thing.
Yeah.
We would always do it on this day and always edit it on that day. And I guess I kind of had no appreciation for the Tao that would be going on in and around it. And there has been a lot of Tao, you know, all the stuff with Kriller, all the extra unforeseen producing stuff that had come up. And I don't know, I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on the origins of it all. Like, I don't know if you remember this, there was an initial conversation we had where we were getting ready to record the very first episode in the beginning, where it was as basic as this. I was saying, okay, so we need to have a notebook to write this down. And you was like, no, it needs to just be whatever it's going to be. We'll just sit here and talk. And I'm like, well, my head's like exploding. We can't do that, you know. And the intro as well, I was sort of like, we have to have an intro. And you were like, why do we need that, you know? And then it kind of became like, oh, yeah, well, obviously Jimmy can just do a basic intro then. It's funny how it started in that way and has evolved over time into something bigger with the same dynamics in play.
Right. It's like your energy and my energy kind of rotating in a orbit of each other, and you're feeding off me and I'm feeding off you. But it's not like we're in total control of that.
Yeah,
experiment.
well, we've learned from Taoism how we're just never in control, right?
Yeah, but you're saying that when we started, you had this illusion of it's going to be totally controlled and then we will understand how to develop it. But the way I see it is, if you have a... Look at it this way. If you know the future, is life worth living?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
If you know exactly what happens in your life till you die, would you even want to live your life anymore? Because...
Yeah, it certainly takes the excitement out of it, doesn't it? That
Well, that's exactly it. You take the... What keeps us going is the mystery.
Mm. And speaking of mystery, like we said before, how those episodes that we made about our favourite spiritual characters, the production of each one in its own matrixy way represented the characters themselves. Like, you remember when we made Way of Water about Lao Tzu, it was just so easy, the conversation just naturally flowed. And then it was like with the Jesus one, just the camera cutting out and the different arguments, we kind of said it was like being crucified in a way.
Well,
you know?
at least bearing the cross up the hill kind of feeling, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I guess we're channeling the spirit of the characters.
By the time we'd finished Zen Diaries 1 and we'd actually taken a moment to reflect on all of that, I kind of went into the next 5 episodes like kind of expecting it in a way.
Obviously, new things will happen that we can't foresee, but if you sense any kind of shift or any kind of within your own life, how have you used the information and the learning, the lessons that we learned along the way to impact your reality? That's what I'd like to know.
Man, that's a great question. The biggest thing that comes to mind is the Taoism of being more flexible in my thinking. You know, it's become, I feel like I'm kind of catching my ego a little bit quicker than I would have done previously. I mean, I've already given a couple of podcast examples of that in today's episode, but I can kind of observe my thoughts a little bit more. Like, was it I think it was Jordan Peterson I was listening to, where he said, if you can look at things through the lens of in what ways could I be wrong, you're on a much better path. And before doing the Radiant Light podcast and taking this wisdom, I don't think I would have had a clue what he was talking about. But now I get it. It's like it would be extremely naive and somewhat ignorant to just think I was right about everything. Like, how can I be right about so much? There's so much infinite knowledge out there in the universe that is just totally untapped. How can one little microscopic human being on this rock that's hurling through space claim to have all the answers, you know? And it just being able to observe my own thoughts and think, well, how could they be wrong? In what ways am I being ridiculous? Is my inner child just screaming out, going crazy here, you know? And sometimes it's a glaring yes, he is, you know. You're totally wrong about this, Jimmy, you know, like, well done for catching yourself. I guess that's not one of my clear practical examples that I usually give. That's more of like a deeper philosophical explanation.
It's like theory and practice.
Do you get it though? You understand.
But the question I would ask Jordan Peterson, if I was to pull a little bit of Tai Chi on him, was what is right and wrong anyway? Like, you know what I mean? Is there a person asking a question to even get an answer? A lot of these Zen guys, they ask these bizarre questions with these koans, and then if you give the wrong answer, it's almost like you were just wrong for asking. It wasn't. If you ask a question to them, it means you're seeking something. That means you haven't gotten the point yet. The point is that you don't have to seek for anything. You just have to be. You just have to exist in the moment. So if you're seeking for answers, or if you're presented with a koan and you have this answer and you think, I'm right, my answer is right, you still miss the point. There is no right answer in a world of infinite answers. You understand?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I mean, it just seems like every time you and I are asking each other a question now about things in our day-to-day life, the answer is always maybe.
Yeah, maybe became the go-to answer.
Yeah, it's the go-to answer for everything now. Yeah, since we became Zen. But what you was talking about just then, was that an example of kind of like you mentioned in the Alan Watts episode, how perhaps he wasn't received so well by some of the Zen masters?
Right.
Is that an example of that? Because he's kind of giving a Christian perspective, or...
There's people who argue that Zen has become kind of a fan club or a boys club or whatever kind of club you want to call it.
Yeah.
And there's a movement called Dark Zen, which kind of went against the mainstream Zen. So it's funny, we said that Alan Watts and some other people helped Zen come to the mainstream. And then once it became mainstream, you know what, it became commercial, right? And it became So there's that side of capitalism, taking what you love and packaging it and selling it and showing you it in a bow, and here, buy this gift of enlightenment for $50, and hopefully you can get enlightened too if you just show up to our club once a week. And it's not supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, there's always times where I'm kind of catching myself and wondering, oh, I hope this isn't just the latest thing that I'm attaching my ego to, you know. Am I really getting the message or not, you know?
That's the tricky part too.
Yeah.
Because I find I could kind of talk about how Zen has kind of become my latest obsession in a sense. But it's an obsession that I've seen threads of in my entire life. And also I see how it can just keep growing in my life infinitely. I wouldn't get bored of it because it keeps showing new facets of itself, even though it's such a simple message. And I've kind of really dove into meditation, martial arts, and all these things. And I've learned how to control my emotions better, but I just don't see it as a phase as so much as a way of remembering who you are or being your natural self. And you can't really get bored of being yourself, right? If you're bored of being yourself, you might just be boring. And then you have to work on that. That's the first thing you have to work on, is make yourself not a boring... Like, you have to have an ego in this life. We talk about the ego in a kind of diminutive way, but without you wouldn't survive.
Yeah, you do need your ego to stay alive. There's certain things that you need it to protect yourself with. So Albert, we did it. We have successfully completed the first 10 episodes of the Radiant Light podcast. The reason we feel that this is such a big milestone is we're actually labelling these first 10 episodes that we've produced as Chapter 1. In Chapter 2 of the Radiant Light podcast, we're now going to... The two key topics...
Phase 2 maybe sounds good. Phase 2.
Phase 2, yeah, that sounds a little bit more Zen natural. It sounds a little bit more natural. Yeah. So the two topics that we're going to be really focusing on going forward are going to be martial arts and mental health. And obviously how the Zen Buddhism applies.
But we want to focus on martial arts that relate back to Zen, in a way.
What was your idea about having 3 pathways kind of running at the same time, Albert?
Well, the other one would be mental health, and then general lifestyle or just travel type things where we're going to places to interview people, doing some yoga, doing whatever we just feel like doing, and then basically giving helpful tips about alternative medicine maybe, and how that can improve mental health, because physical health is connected to mental health, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and spiritual as well.
Yeah, they all go hand in hand. So those 3 paths kind of need one another.
Yeah, absolutely. We're, as Albert kind of briefly touched on there, we'll be looking to bring more guests and friends of the podcast onto the show. Sean is going to be back very soon as well, isn't he, to speak about Shaolin Temple. He's actually been there. We kind of teased that at the end of our Confucius episode. It's going to be fun. And that appears to be all we have time for on today's episode. And don't forget to like this episode and follow us on YouTube, as well as whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. And you can even follow us on Instagram too. So until next time, good night, God bless, and namaste.
Namaste Zen.